Oh my God.
So stuff happened.
Oh my God.
So the story ended. A story ended. We had a standard hero's journey. A hero goes to this place and all this stuff happens and she won.
She beat the final boss. Student Council President goes down.
Yep.
Goes down hard.
So who's this guy?
Okay, so first of all, this is a recap episode, right? 99% of this episode is just a recap of the duels that have happened up until now, right? But in between those recaps, there's actual meaningful things happening. It's like usually in anime, recap episodes are like, why do I gotta watch this? I already seen every episode.
In fact, in a way, this one's almost like commentary on a DVD track because now we have this new character. That's Akio, by the way. It's okay that you know that. That's a guy.
Who is that man? We didn't say his name in the episode.
But he showed up and he explained to us what all the duels were.
友情、選択、理性、恋愛、崇拝、信念、そして自分。
In fact, every duel had a name. He just did a play-by-play of see what happened here, see what happened here. He explained the entire show in a sense.
Yeah, well, at least up until this point.
Yep.
Except for the stuff that's unexplained. He basically explained everything that just happened, and while simultaneously, by his mere existence, added in all the new questions that you are now asking.
And then even better, notice how the end of this episode is just a bunch of freaky shit all in a row. Just black roses, who's this
You mean the
other
final
person?
2 seconds of the episode
Yeah.
is just a bunch of flash frames of everything that we're going to see in the next 13 episodes?
All these boys in uniforms like, black rose, black ring, black duelist ring.
Okay, so the episode opens up with the Shadow Girls, right? And we know from...
Atypical.
Right, so we already know from previous episodes that once the Shadow Girls appear, the duel begins, and that's when the freaky shit comes out. Up until that point, there's no freaky shit.
So the freaky shit began literally from the beginning of this episode after
The whole episode is freaky shit.
they retold the fairy tale.
それは昔々のお話です。あるところにお父様とお母様を亡くし、
Yep.
The thing that was the opening of, hey, this is what this show's about, that they show in the first few episodes, then they stopped showing. They showed it again now.
たった一人で深い悲しみに耐える小さな君、その強さ、気高さをどうか大人になっても失わないで、今日の思い出にこれを。私たちまた会えるわよね。その指輪が君を僕のところへ導くだろう。
Well, I mean, if you're going to recap the show, you got to start with, right? Someone theoretically, practically speaking in the real world, someone who starts watching Utena in this second arc is going to use this episode as the get up to speed deal.
Exactly.
So it's necessary for that, if not necessary for anything else.
Now, it's interesting because in the original DVD release in the United States, this was the 13th episode, the last episode of season 1. But in the remastered re-release, it's the first episode of season 2, which I find very interesting. Took me a while to actually find the episode on the DVD as a result.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you can go both ways, right? It completely recaps season 1, right? It doesn't actually do anything season 2 except preview it. So you could... Like, if you're only counting the last 2 seconds of the episode, or are you counting the first, whatever.
Yep.
I guess if you're practically speaking, if you bought someone the second DVD box set without buying them the first box set, you would need that 13th episode to start with.
Exactly.
Right? So that's why I think it's a better choice as a DVD printer to put it in the second box.
Not to get too much into meta stuff, but in the US, when they released those first 13 episodes, they didn't release any more Utena. It's not like there was another box set you could get.
The second and third arcs weren't released in the US until way later.
We watched like 4th generation VHS fan subs, and we missed a few episodes because they weren't watchable due to tracking issues.
Yep.
We're old. So we get a recap, but so this guy appeared.
We don't know who this guy is, but he looks suspiciously like the prince.
He goes to the dueling arena, so we already know something about what's going on.
And he goes up to the castle.
Now, as you may recall,
the castle that was hanging upside down.
The castle that Saionji was desperate to get into.
今夜城が降りてくると世界の果てが俺に言ってきたのだ。誰にも私はしない。お前と一緒に永遠を手に入れるのはこの俺だ。城が降りてくる。 俺はここだぞ。世界の果てよ。今こそ約束を果たせ。永遠を我が手に。
Would have done anything to get into
This guy just goes up into it somehow, teleporting up into it, flying or something. He goes up in the castle.
He knows the secret of the castle.
Right. He can go straight up in there, no problem.
And what's in the castle? The prince, Dios, just there. The power of Dios, like straight up.
He's sitting on the world shell, waiting for it to break.
And
Taking a chill. He's not even, it's weird. It's like he doesn't say anything, but he moves a little bit, maybe?
he's menacing like the Lich in Adventure Time.
Right,
just
he
sitting
has
there.
no face. He's got a sword that looks like the sword of Dios, except it's black and sort of
Yeah.
evil. He's sitting there. He's not asleep, but he's not moving. He's like awaiting for his power to be released. As soon as that world shell breaks, Dios is going to come out of the booth.
But he reacts a little bit. There's a moment, and it's very telling. I don't really want to address it now, but
He's like, oh, are you glaring at me?
at the end of the show, when you have finished the show, think back to this moment where Akio, the older guy, says something.
The guy who looks a lot like Dios?
Yup.
君が完全に解放される日も近いのかもしれない。そう怖い顔するなよ。その日を待ち望んでいるという点において、君と私の利益は共通しているんだから。
And then Dios looks up at him, and he basically says, don't glare at me, as though maybe there is an adversarial relationship here. This is not just a simple thing that's going on. But think back to that when you finish the show.
All right, so after he talks, we see all this crazy shit that, you know, even though it's only like a minute of animation and most of the episode is recap, you see this. And you're just like, oh my god, what is this? And you have
'Cause
you have a million questions.
I mean, look, Toga, we know Toga is
New
now...
character out of nowhere. Mysteries, just like, we'll show you what's in the castle. Here you go.
But look at how the show...
Oh, that didn't actually answer anything, did it? Just made you ask more questions.
But the show, much like a magician, is directing our attention toward the things that are going to matter to the next season.
That's exactly right.
Toga is fucked up.
世界の殻を破らねば我らは生まれずに死んでゆく世界の殻を破らねば我らは生まれずに死んでゆく世界の殻を破らねば我らは生まれずに死んでゆく世界の殻を破らねば我らは生まれずに死んでゆく世界の殻を破らねば
Yeah, so Toga lost. We already know that in,
He
in
lost
episode 12.
Everything. The idea that he could lose, as you remember we talked about, was inconceivable. The fact that he lost shattered his entire world. His eggshells broke.
He is totally hosed. So Toga is, you see him basically sitting by the window, not moving, not saying anything. A lot like Dio sitting on the world shell, right? And even his sister opens the door and is like, well, and closes
What's
the
he listening? He is listening to.
She doesn't. You'd think she would go over to him and be like, "Toga, wake up! Come on, you can get through this."
You get the impression that she has
But
given
nope.
up.
She's
That
just
this
like,
is-
well.
This has been happening for so long that she literally knows there's nothing she can do. But what is he
He's
listening
done.
to? He is listening to himself, not saying the entire Chick's Egg World Revolution speech the Student Council gives, just one part about the shell being cracked.
世界の殻を破らねば我らも生まれずに死んでゆく世界の殻を破らねば我らは生まれずに死んでゆく
Then,
On a loop, on an old-fashioned reel-to-reel.
so in a way, his shell was cracked, and what did he get for it? Nothing. Maybe revolution and destroying the world to remake it isn't all it's cracked up to be. But two, the egg, the shell, you see it physically. Dios is sitting on it, and the show says openly the power of Dios is in there.
君はまだ目覚めないのか。まだ卵の殻を破れずにいるのか。君の力、ディオスの力のすべてが蘇るかもしれない。
Yep, and it's starting to crack.
あの時から君の力、ディオスの力はついに封印が解け始めたのだ。
It's starting to
It's
crack,
in the upside-down castle.
and it's starting to crack because of Utena.
Yep.
傷つきながらもバラの花嫁を守る彼女の姿は何か懐かしいものを思い出させたな。
Akio says, he's like, Utena, as the different duels are being recapped, right? He says like, that's when she started to break the shell, right? Starting with the second duel.
Yep. Now, this is where, unfortunately, I'll warn you that every episode you get a duel and a name of a duel from this bit. it's implied that every single duel in Shoujo Kakame Utena has a name.
Even all the ones yet to come.
And the last duel is named Revolution.
確かにこのまま進んで革命という名の決闘まで到達する可能性はある。
Shocking. What a shocking name. I didn't... Oh, really? I never would have expected the last duel to be called Revolution. I mean...
Unfortunately, the show does not actually give you all those names.
How could you not do that?
There are no more episodes like this in the show.
You could think of it like the angels in Evangelion where they all have a name.
Yep.
Right? Except they actually give you all those names.
They do.
And the same way that in Madoka Magica, right? All the witches have names.
Now, you might see some fan places where they talk about, oh, this duel was named that or that. Those either come from art books, non-canonical sources, fans.
Mangas.
Yep, exactly.
Things like that.
But it doesn't matter what each duel is about. What matters is what they showed us here. They showed us this set of duels, and they showed us that might makes right.
Yes. That's the first thing that he says, that the Shadow Girls say is, oh, might makes right, you say. And then we see a series of might making right.
So the first duel, friendship. The duel's named friendship. The person who wins is the person who is fighting for friendship. So what's Utena fighting for?
あんた剣道部の主将だってな。今日の放課後、僕と決闘だ。僕が昨日あなたと決闘したのは若葉の友達のためさ。バラの花嫁なんて興味ないね。
What's Saionji fighting for?
俺は思った。奴はきっと彼女に永遠のものを見せたに違いないと。桐生東が。奴はいつも俺より先に俺の知らない世界に行く。
いつかあの空に浮かぶお城に行きたいの。あそこには永遠のものがあるの。
貴様もあの空に浮かぶ城を見たろう。あの城には永遠があるんだ。俺は彼女と一緒にそこへ行く。東がには負けない。
His love journal.
本当の僕を見ろ。ここには真実のみが記されている僕たちの交換日記。
日記
Yeah, exactly. So Utena was
Just a
fighting.
bunch of bullshit.
Utena was right about friendship. She was fighting for a noble and just cause.
お姫様を救う白馬の王子様。
たった一人で深い悲しみに耐える小さな君、その強さ、気高さをどうか大人になっても失わないで。
何？
Friendship. She won the duel by magic, a duel that she had no right to win. She had no
Against the
skill.
captain of the kendo team.
So there's an implication that in the dueling arena, if you win a duel, it's because on a fundamental level, you are right.
In a way, they said might makes right, but really right makes might. Whoever's right has more might and therefore wins.
So let's go through the rest of these duels now. The second duel, choice.
So this is where the world shell begins to break, right? If you remember watching the show, that first duel was sort of an accident. Like, Utena didn't really, like, go... She sort of stumbled into
She
the
was
dueling
like,
arena.
yo, asshole, let's fight after school. And he was like, oh, ring, duel, magic, whatever. And she just wanted to go kick his ass.
今日の放課後、僕と決闘だ。
なんだお前は。そうか。君が次の挑戦者だったのか。
何のことだ。
It's like she wanted,
Right.
she wanted to pull a Wendy from South Park with Cartman.
Exactly. So it sort of wasn't the legit duel, which is sort of why there was a rematch.
But it was a named duel. You get the impression that friendship, the first duel, is the easiest thing. That a lot of people legitimately fight for friendship.
It's magic.
That's a different show. Many people have fought for friendship. It's a noble thing to fight for. But remember in the second episode, the second duel, Utena was going to give up.
僕はそんな無意味な決闘をするつもりはないから。バカバカしい。理由のない決闘をするつもりはないね。わざと負けるさ。それで問題はないわけだ。
ええ、お好きなように。
She was going to bail on the duels because that's so
She's like,
stupid.
this dueling stuff is all bullshit. I'm just going to lose on purpose.
And then she chose to win.
もらった。いい度胸だ。命よりバラをかばうとはな。 分かっているな。生死に関係なくバラを散らされた者の負けだ。
And to keep
Yes.
fighting.
The second duel is choice. The choice that was made was not anything to do with Saionji, right? It was Utena's choice to, I'm going to start taking these duels seriously, and they're not a bunch of bullshit.
And notice how Akio, this guy, also points out the Rose Bride was moved.
バラの花嫁も少しは心が動いたのではないか。
By Utena. It wasn't just Dios.
Like, even the Rose Bride was moved. Like, holy shit, wow, that doesn't happen.
So Dios and the Rose Bride were both moved, and the shell is starting to crack because Utena is winning these duels that are named
Somehow differently than the people who won them before. Saionji won some duel previous to the show starting, but that didn't move the Rose Bride or Dios.
Was it a duel that counted, however? They'd never gotten this
Yeah,
far
we don't know what
before.
the name of those are or who he fought or...
But now think back to earlier in the show when we see that chart that the Student Council like tracking like who fights whom and when. So the duels are set up, it's implied, to make this happen.
Well, the end of the world, who is some still mysterious force that sends the letters, right? I guess knows the order and, tells them
Yup.
which ones are going to go down.
It is implied, you can read, without any spoilers and know anything about the rest of the show, that this man is trying to make these duels happen in this order to release the power of Dios for the benefit of
Yes.
himself and for Dios himself, the prince sitting on the egg,
Yes.
who is obviously the prince Utena met as a child.
Yes, he says completely in plain English, right? He is hopeful that Utena can get the job done. She seems to actually be succeeding where others have failed, and he says to the prince, "Oh, come on, this is it's a win-win for you and me."
Yup.
Right? Him and the prince both want the shell broken. The prince seems a little bit but Akio is like, "Yeah, we want Utena to kick some ass. Let's make this go."
Yup. And then the rest of the duels after that, what does Akio say? He says that these duels were personal.
その後の戦いも随分個性的だ。
Right. But they weren't personal for Utena like the first one and the second one. They were personal for the character she was up against.
Because if you look at the reason they give, the name of each of the rest of these duels, I
Right.
mean...
So reason, that's Mickey's reason or his lack of reason
Yup.
regarding his sister.
What is he
and-
fighting for? He's fighting for a memory that is literally false, a world that never existed. So his fundamental first principle for dueling is wrong.
Yep. Love, which is jury.
Jury is fighting for love in the completely wrong way. We've talked about
Right.
that.
Right. Adoration, which is
That one's extra special because look at something very important.
she adores her brother so much.
キスはキスはしてくださらないのですか？
But we get a recap of every duel, right? Notice how the recap of Nanami's duel does not show anything after her flower was broken. In the actual episode, she fucking pulls out another knife and tries to murder Utena.
For reals.
And that is not part of the duel.
No, it's not.
That is separate. That's just Nanami. So if you look at the rest of the duel, Toga drove her to duel. He used her adoration of him to trick her into becoming a duelist to further his own agenda. So she thought she was fighting for the adoration of her brother, but really she was fighting to further his bullshit.
Right. So all of these personal duels so far, they're not about really Utena. They're about the other person. They're fighting Utena because Utena happens to have the Rose Bride right now. So
Yup.
she's the one that you fight.
So it's not just
and they
that-
lose because they're wrong. The other two, right, friendship and choice, were Utena fighting for herself and winning because she was right. And all these ones are people with their own fucking problems losing.
So you get this implication that if one of the people is wrong, they lose. If both people are right, however,
It comes down to actual sword fighting.
well, look at Jury's fight. Because remember, Jury almost won that duel.
奇跡を信じてってのが君の口癖だったね。だけど
奇跡なんてないんだよ
Utena was about to win with the power of Dios, and then, Juri just overcomes it because she was also fighting at that exact moment for love. But then other factors caused her to not really be fighting for that,
Yep. Okay.
as we talked about in her episode.
All right, so then the two Toga duels. The first one is conviction, and Toga wins, clearly because he has conviction, and there's no question about
Yes,
that.
and meanwhile, what was Utena's conviction? Her conviction through the entire show up to this point was to be a prince.
それはいいとして、お姫様は王子様に憧れるあまり、自分も王子様になる決意をしてしまったのです。
To be, and now to be Anthy's prince. And suddenly, she loses that conviction.
Right,
She
because she's believing that Toga is the prince. She fell for it.
and she
right?
falls for the idea that maybe I should just be a princess.
その王子様ってのは俺みたいなやつじゃなかったか。
王子様。
All right, and Toga's conviction of I'm owning this shit, I run this show is pretty much unstoppable.
And then literally the next duel, Self,
今から僕の普通を取り戻してくれよ。
どうしてまた俺と決闘する気になった？
君より大切にしたいものがあるだけさ。
なるほど。自分を取り戻したわけか。
僕は夢宮のことが何も分かってないのかもしれない。でも今は自分にとっての普通を取り戻したいんだ。
she regains herself. She fights for herself and wins. And Toga, because he had already won, remember, he had the Rose Bride, his entire plan had worked. He was 100% set.
He was already done. He's like, all right.
He had nothing to fight for. He wasn't fighting for anything.
Yeah, he already had everything he wanted. There was no self for Toga. Toga already is full of himself. He doesn't need any more self.
So think about this. The fact that he lost,
Yeah.
he lost his self. And you see the
And
consequences
now
of that now.
now he's all fucked up.
Now he's gone. And sad point, as much as I love Toga, he's basically gone for the entire next season.
Yeah.
He is sitting in
The
that
best,
room.
the most interesting, awesomest character we're not going to get to see for
You're going to get
13
some
more
Sionji and some
You're gonna get
Mickey.
some scenes of like him sitting there with like the phone ringing and him not picking up
Yeah.
or looking sad out the window just to remind you that he's there, but he's not going to do anything until the third arc.
So other little bits in this episode. In the Shadow Girl thing, at the end, you get another Shadow Girl
That's
thing.
part of the very rapid Black Rose, the second arc hints.
But what happens there? What's that Shadow Girl thing?
There's a UFO that comes down.
There's a UFO that comes down.
What the hell? How does that fit with anything? Aliens? What aliens had to do with this?
For the rest of Utena, if you really are trying to figure this show out, the one thing to pay attention to that's easy is just make a note of every time the Shadow Girls show a UFO arriving and when they show a UFO departing.
There are a lot of UFOs and they sort of matter.
And they come and go for it'll become very obvious what's going on as you get toward the end of
yes,
the
we'll
show.
know when the secret aliens that are running Otori Academy have arrived and left if we pay attention to the Shadow Girls.
Well,
Or are the Shadow Girls aliens themselves? Oh.
when do the Shadow Girls duel?
Oh, no.
They duel when the horses come at the end.
The horses that don't come.
Well, horses do come, but in an
Right.
entirely different context.
Yeah. Another just, not really big deal, but just a small note. As they're recapping these duels, right? Before each one, they show like an hourglass like running out, and that's like this like the hourglass is full of sand of the color of the duelist Utena is facing, right? You can see you can tell by looking at the hourglass. It's like, oh, the time ran out on that duel, and then there's a new filled hourglass for the next one.
Yep.
And then you've also got these stained glass windows, which you presume are up in the castle, one per duel, that
Yup.
are the color of the duelist that Utena is fighting.
Meaning,
And they have the name of the duel in French. Why in French? Because Japan has a French fetish. That's
Yup.
the only reason.
La Filette Revolutionary Utena.
Right, the name of the show.
Revolutionnaire.
Right, the real name of the show is not Shoujo Kakame Utena or Revolutionary Girl Utena. It's Filet Revolution.
Scott, you speak fluent French.
I
can
do.
tell.
Yes.
So, at the very end of this, too, we get a little bit where just as that guy is leaving, there's someone with him. And it can't be.
You had to really pay attention to notice this, right? So Akio, guy, we didn't know his name, but we just said it, he's done talking to the prince after all the duels are over. He walks down this hallway to leave the castle, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how there's a hallway in the castle. It doesn't make any sense, architecturally speaking. And there's some shadow there that he holds the shadow's hand and walks away with this person that is obviously Anthy.
Because, and you don't need to have spoilers to figure
you
this
can
out.
tell by the silhouette that it's Anthy.
But even
so
if you
Anthy
can't-
knows this guy, but somehow no one else knows this guy.
Because even if you can't, as soon as she gets back, like Anthy comes back to Utena, it's like, hey, where were you?
ただいまウテナ様チュチュ。
おかえり。どこに行ってたの？
Up in the castle, but I'm not going to say that. You know.
But little details like that, you can figure out a lot of things in the show just by paying attention to what scene happens next. If there's a scene and it ends, where the next scene starts usually matters a lot. Like in in Watchmen. Watchmen does that, the comic. Casablanca does that, the movie.
Yep.
Guess what? Media do that. So whenever there's a scene, pay attention to what happens in the next scene. The transition between the two is usually telling you something.
Right. So in addition to recapping, we have all these new questions. What's in the world shell?
Yep.
Who's
well, we know what's in the world shell, the Power of Dios.
Right, but what is the Power of Dios? How does Utena winning duels cause it to break?
Well, it's implied, I think, that the shell starts to crack because Dios is in the castle watching these duels.
Right. Why does Dios give Utena his sword?
Because Utena is, he takes the sword from Anthy. Everyone takes the sword.
Right.
When he comes down and gives her the power.
Right. Why is he doing that?
Because he takes an interest, because he's the prince that Utena met as a child.
Sure.
So he instills her with that noble spirit.
一人で深い悲しみに耐える小さな君、その強さ、気高さをどうか大人になっても失わないで。
He gives her the shell cracks because that power is trying to get out to help a prince.
Who's this red shirt guy that we just spoiled and told you his name is Akio? How does he know the prince? How did he get up in the castle? How does he know Anthy? Why does Anthy know him? But why does Anthy not say anything? Why, if he's an important guy, how come no one knows he exists? Or we've never seen him up until now.
In season 1, who's this Toga guy? Why does he seem to know a whole bunch more about what's going on than everyone else?
Yep.
This is Toga times 1,000.
All right, so the Black Rose preview bit, a bunch of flashes of quick images. There's a butterfly in a frame on the wall.
That matters a lot.
What's up with that? There's a bunch of dudes in blue school uniforms that are Otori uniforms. It's a lot like the ones that the no-name school guys wear now. They're standing in a room and then they turn around.
And they look at you ominously.
And then they all look at the same time.
And then you see a bunch of black roses flying up around the one rose of Utena.
And then there's one black rose, like in a glass case, standing up magically somehow.
So, the show, they basically say at this point, now we're going to begin another stage. There's an implication that the reason this guy went up into the castle, to talk about this with himself, I guess,
to activate stage 2 of his master plan.
だが、そろそろ新しいステージが始まる。これから先の決闘を彼女はどう戦うんだろうな。
Those first set of duels, by getting through all of those, which it's implied this has not ever happened before, or at least hasn't happened recently, that now it's time, now it is this stuff, the world versus Utena. That it's no longer like these people having their own personal convictions and all this stuff. Now, all these Black Roses, like Utena is going to be fighting to see if she makes it through the Survivor Series to the duel revolution.
Yeah. So, and it's, a Black Rose just by its nature, if you've watched the first season, right, you see all these different colored roses for all these different colored people. Obviously, black is such a scary, badass color, right? There hasn't been a Black Rose even appearing even once during all the first 12 episodes. And suddenly it's like, here's a black one. It's like, oh shit. It's the exact opposite of the prince's white rose. It's in stark contrast to Utena's pink rose.
Black rose, black duelist ring.
It's like weird. Yeah, then that's right. The black duelist ring. It's like, that is just the fact that even exists is some scary shit.
Because remember, when Utena shows up and has that ring, that's a big goddamn deal.
我々生徒会以外にも世界の果てから手紙を受け取っていた者がいたの。
さあな。だがバラの刻印ははめていた。この目で見た。
何者だその少女。
Right.
Like the fact that she got that ring was crazy.
So the fact that there is a black one somewhere, what does that even mean? Who has it? What? Oh my God.
Meanwhile, we still don't know where Toga got that extra ring to give Nunami.
Well,
Nunami got it from somewhere, and she keeps wearing it.
I don't know.
So he got it from someone.
It's legit. She got into the ring,
Yeah,
the arena.
and her duel counted.
Yeah. So he got a legit ring from somewhere. Maybe he just had two.
So from this point on, Utena's awesome. But the show goes off the rails awesome.
Right. So, I mean, it was already a little bit off the rails already. This is where we are like on the maglev train, except the magnets got screwed up. It's like Galaxy Express action going into space on this train. So we're going to start watching those real soon because it's cold and we're not going outside.